Welcome back to Withdraw Consent. I'm Jack. Today we have episode 14 in the Holocaust series where we're going to talk about the camp Bergen-Belsen. Let me tell you why we're going to talk about this particular camp, because as we're going to see in a second, this camp was one of the ones that was used to define the Holocaust. And even if you haven't heard of it or you're not too interested in it, a ton of the survivor stories come from there. And it's just the epitome of the story about how the U.S., the Allies, but I'm going to say the United States, at the behest of American Jews, caused all the death in the camps. That leads, we're going to read a story from the British where the Germans from the camp leave the camp and come with their hands up down the road to the British and beg them to come to the camp and help save the Jews. Because the bad guys inside, the bad guys, the Germans, right, are trying to save the Jews by going to get the UK soldiers to come help because of what the Americans have done to that camp. And so I got receipts. I got everything for you here. So now one thing I want to say, this is also important because Anne Frank died there. And on Thursday's episode, we're going to talk about episode 15 of the Holocaust series. We're going to talk about whether or not Anne Frank's book is important or if it's a forgery or if it's going to be interesting. Some stuff I came up with that you've never heard elsewhere. This is some brand new stuff. So basically, I want to put a picture up on the screen. And so this is an error I've made in past episodes. I want to correct it now. It was not an error made out of malice. But if you look at this picture here, I said that this picture, which I haven't shown you before, but I said that this picture came from Bergen-Belsen. It did not. It came from Dachau, and it was in Dachau from 1965 to 2003. And it was basically like they had faked a gas chamber there, where there's never even a claim that there's a gas chamber there. And I had falsely attributed that as Bergen-Belsen, but it's in Dachau. So in a future episode about Dachau, the camp, I will bring that up. Now, first of all, let me put this map up on the screen. So this is a map of the death camps, and I just want to show you of the camps. I'm sorry, and I want to show you how there's no claim that the U.S., UK, Free French ever found a death camp ever. So if you look at this map, this is obviously Germany, Poland on the right, France on the left, and so although the light blue squares are camps that were found in the U.S., British, French post-war zones, and all the red camps are camps in the Soviet post-war zone. So red camps are not death camps, they're just Soviet captured camps, okay? If you look at the blue ones, you'll see Bergen-Belsen in the upper left, right above Germany. You see Buchenwald, right below Germany. And if you go down to the bottom, you see Dachau, Mauthausen, right? None of these are now said to be death camps at all. And if you look on the right, you'll find Auschwitz-Birkenau, and then you'll find the camps of Treblinka, Sobibor, Lublin-Majdanek, and Belzec and Chelmo, which are all the camps that are claimed now to be the death camps. And I'll bring up this table again, which is from the USHMM website, funded 9 figures a year by the United States government, totally pro-Holocaust. You can see here this tells you where the 6 million died, all 6 million. First is Auschwitz, then Treblinka, Reinhardt camps, Belzec, Sobibor, Chelmo. No other named camps down here, just shooting operations and stuff like that. So basically, we've established that the U.S. never found a death camp ever, or the U.K. or the Free French. They were all found by the Soviets. And that Bergen-Belsen is not claimed to be a death camp, right? Okay, now I'm going to put up on the screen the page from the USHMM about Bergen-Belsen. And I want to point something out here, okay, on this. They got key facts where they tell you just the main points about Bergen-Belsen. Point 1 is, as a result of overcrowded and horrific living conditions where disease and starvation flourished, tens of thousands of people in prison there died. Anne Frank was one of those people one of the people deported to Bergen-Belsen. Look at point number 3. Soon after liberation, Bergen-Belsen gained international notoriety as a site of Nazi mass murder. Okay, so my point here is that point 1 was very true, and point 3 is very false. Because what they're going to do is that the Holocaust story is going to falsely attribute the deaths at Bergen-Belsen, specifically at Bergen-Belsen, to Nazi mass murder, as we saw. Like, that's not my words, that's theirs. International notoriety is a site of Nazi mass murder. There was no mass murder that happened there at all. It was just the Allies destroying them. Now, I'm going to put a picture up on the screen. And this is a sign that is was at the camp. And if you see, this is the site of the infamous Belsen concentration camp, liberated by the British on 15 April 1905. 10,000 unburied dead were found here. Fact check, true. Another 13,000 have since died. Kind of true, I guess. All of them victims of the German New Order in Europe and an example of Nazi culture. Okay, so that's obviously nonsense at the end, because we're going to find out that the Germans didn't kill any of these people and that they were trying to incinerate the bodies as fast as they could to prevent the disease. But the 10,000 bodies that they found above ground were ones that they were incapable of incinerating because they had died so fast. So they were dying so fast. So what happens is this. Basically, I've told the story before, but this is very important right here, is that the Jewish American Congress, or the JAC, which is not a Congress, just a group, told the United States government, hey, you got to bomb the railways into these death camps, because there's these death trains going to the death camps and they're doing a lot of deathy things there. So we're talking about camps like this camp, Bergen-Belsen. We're talking about Dachau. We're talking about Buchenwald. We're talking about camps that we were guaranteed if we liberate these camps, we will find death camps. The United States never found a death camp, never once. This was all just a lie. So the United States government said, no, we're not doing that. We're actually fighting a military target. And then they begged them and begged them and begged them. And finally, the Jewish American Congress put enough pressure on the United States government that they had to save the Jews by bombing the death train lines, that the death trains were coming to the death camps. Of course, there were no death trains or no death camps on this side of Germany at all. So this was all ridiculous what was happening. The United States bombed the rail lines. Now they can't get supplies to the camps. Now what happens? They don't have medicine, they don't have food, and they don't have Zyklon-B. Zyklon-B is the thing that they need. It's a pesticide. We've talked about this before. They use it to delouse the clothes to get rid of the lice. The lice carry typhus. Typhus is the war disease. Typhus is going to kill all these people because they don't have the Zyklon-B to delouse anything. They have no medicine to treat anything, and they don't have food to feed the prisoners. It's going to be a disaster, right? And this is all because, now I'm not blaming the Jewish American Congress. They're terrible people, obviously, but you beg a guy with a gun to shoot that guy, and you're terrible for begging them, maybe, but the guy with the gun is the guy who's at fault here. So it's the United States specifically. I'm not blaming the British or the Free French either. So the United States caused this catastrophe. Now let's look at the table from the camp, okay? I'm going to put this up on the screen. This is a table that says Die Toten von Bergen-Belsen in den letzten Kriegsmonaten, okay? So this is deaths in Bergen-Belsen in the last years of the war, the last months of the war. And so on the bottom, you have December 1944, January 1945, February, March, April 1945. On the left, it's 5,000, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 dead. So what we see in December, before it gets bad, the disease spreads in the camp, 350 people died in the camp in the whole month. In January, 800 to 1,000. So now we're talking about tripling, right? Then we're talking February 1945, 6,000 to 7,000. So now we're going up 6 to 7 times more. And then we go up another 3 times more than that for March and April, with an astonishing 18,168 dead and 18,355 dead. So what this table tells us is that they weren't just killing people at this camp, because there were 350 that died in December, and that this disease came on rapidly at the exact time that the war was ending. And you could go look at the piles of bodies if you want to. I'm not going to put them on here because there's a bunch of just nakedness and stuff like that, and death and just terribleness. But when you look at the piles of bodies, and you've seen them before in school, you've seen them, the bodies are completely emaciated. There's nothing left but just bones and just barely a little bit of skin on them, And that's the effect of typhus. Typhus causes you to not be able to keep any calories in your body. You lose them out of every which way you can possibly lose them, until you basically just shrivel up and die. And it's a terrible thing. And it's the war disease. And if you remember, there's those signs that the Germans had, and they said, 1 lice, your death. And the German soldiers had to check each other for lice every day and stuff like that, because 1 lice and you die. This is how important it is. And this is how important it was for the Zyklon-B. So, because the Zyklon-B was the savior of these camps for not allowing them to succumb to this type of just terrible death. And you could read about it if you want, but one of the early proofs, this is The Hoax of the 20th Century by Arthur R. Butts, and I'm going to read a bit of it in a second. But before Auschwitz was scientifically disproved in the late 80s and early 90s, which we covered in episode 2, Auschwitz, if you want to look at the link in the description, all the videos from the Holocaust series are there. One of the proofs that they used that the Holocaust didn't happen is that they have the cargo manifest for every Zyklon-B shipment that was ever made in Germany. And basically what they found when they studied those manifests is they found that an equal amount of Zyklon-B went out to each camp based on a per capita basis, whether or not it was claimed to be a death camp or not. So, for example, Bergen-Belsen got X amount and Auschwitz got X amount based on the population of the camp. Therefore, you couldn't have been executing people at Auschwitz because you didn't have enough Zyklon-B, obviously. Okay, so now I want to go to this article linked below, and it's called Belsen on Trial 1945. Here's the sign I showed you earlier. Now, this is a story about the Germans coming up. This is from the British perspective, the Germans coming up and begging for help. So in early April 1945, troops of the British 11th Armored Division were speeding across northern Germany as part of the final push toward Allied victory over the forces of Nazism. The progress was temporarily checked by German request for a localized truce at a place called Bergen-Belsen, which lay on the division's path of advance. The envoy sent to negotiate the truce explained that typhus had taken hold in a prison camp there and that there was a danger of the disease spreading beyond its confines. The British verified the truth of the statement, and the area was declared a neutral zone. On 15th April, soldiers of the 63rd Anti-Tank Regiment, Royal Artillery, were the first to enter the Belsen camp. What they found there came to epitomize the horror of the Nazi concentration camp, and its imagery has continued to shape popular perceptions of the Holocaust to this day. So, I don't want to go down with those pictures, but So basically, I didn't know that this part of the story, that the Germans had came and asked for a truce because what was happening was so horrific. But what was happening that was horrific was not that the Nazis had done something terrible to these people. It's that the rail lines had been bombed and the Nazis were unable to help these people at all. And so then disaster ensued. And you can go on different... So they have these propaganda things where like you march to the local German population and say, look what the Nazis have done. But it's not what the Nazis have done. The Nazis have not done that, right? That's what America did. And like you could go on one of these references below, I believe it's on there. You could go down, you could look at a video, and it's a video of them forcing the German soldiers who didn't want the Jewish people in the camp to die to carry their typhus-ridden naked bodies and throw them in a mass grave, while Jews who lived through the camp stand there and mock them, and British soldiers stand there and you should go get the Americans to do this. This is a job for the Americans because it's okay. So look, I'm going to take you to this other story. This is kind of a straw man but this is how the myth gets going, you know, about just crazy things happening at these camps. So obviously there were no death chambers, right? Because there's no even claim that is. But listen to this. August 5th, 1993, St. Laurent. As an 11-year-old boy held captive at the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp during World War II, Moshe Pierre was sent to the gas chamber at least 6 times. Each time he survived, watching with horror as many of the women and children gasped with him, collapsed and were ended. To this day, Pierre doesn't know how he was able to survive. Quote, maybe children resist better, I don't know, end quote, he said in an interview last week. Now, 60-year-old Pierre has spent the last 19 years writing a first-person account of the horror he witnessed at Bergen-Belsen. On Sunday, he spoke to about 300 young adults at the Petah Tikva Sephardic congregation in St. Laurent about this book and his experience as a Holocaust survivor. Okay, this type of story, I should go like that. This type of story is absolutely ridiculous, right? So I'm going to put a clip up on the screen, which is a newspaper article where this story was actually, this is the Gazette Montreal, Thursday, August 5th, 1993. This is literally in the newspaper. Look at this, the exact quote we just read. Moshe Pierre was sent to the gas chamber at least 6 times. Each time he survived, watching with horror as many of the women. That's quoted from this exact news article, right? So this is kind of a straw man I'm making here. But literally people are being influenced by this propaganda, so it's kind of not as straw man as that. Like nobody claims that there were gas chambers there. But if you just read this article, you're like, the horror of these Nazis. You know what I mean? Of course, nobody claims that there was ever a gas chamber at Bergen-Belsen. That's not a thing, right? This is going to play into Thursday's episode when Anne Frank is sent to her death, obviously, at a, death camp with gas chambers. It's Bergen-Belsen. Anyways, this story is also important because I'm probably never going to make an episode on Buchenwald, right? But it's the exact same story. So just doing this episode covers it. It covers at a lot of the camps that the Allies found was that you get there and there's these piles of bodies, which the Germans were trying to incinerate as they died of typhus, obviously to keep the typhus out of the camp or to lessen the amount of typhus, but there was nothing they could do. So I will cover Dachau later because there's interesting stuff where apparently the children were strong enough to make scratch marks in concrete walls, right? While they were being gassed, though later on they said there was never a gas chamber there. So then what Army Engineering Corps faked the wall scratches and all this? It's good. I think it's got its own value in of itself. But of the Western camps, I'm done. I'm not going to do any more. On Thursday, we're going to do the Anne Frank thing. I got a new angle on it. I think it's going to be very interesting. Hope to see you there. I'm going to add this in at the end because I think that I well documented enough about the typhus and stuff like this, but this is extremely well documented. And I'll take a picture of this book and put it up on the screen so you can see. This is page 55. But basically it says, it is, I believe, Belsen, which has always constituted the effective mass propaganda proof of exterminations. And even today you will find such scenes occasionally waved around as proof. In fact, these scenes, repeated in varying degrees at other German camps, e.g. Dachau and Buchenwald, were much less related to extermination than the scenes at Dresden after the British-American raids of February 1945, when many, many times as many bodies were found lying around. The deaths at Belsen were the result of a total loss of control, not a deliberate policy. Equivalent scenes could easily have existed in any country invaded on all sides by enemy armies, crippled by powerful strategic bombings, which had caused all sorts of shortages and chaotic conditions. The major cause of the deaths at Belsen was a typhus epidemic. So, I mean, if you just want more proof, you could continue reading on it if you're interested. It's a really dry book, but it's really factual and well sourced. Anyways, I just wanted to add that in here in case you need additional proof of what I'm saying. It just backs up everything I've been saying for 14 episodes now, and 15 to come on Thursday. See you there.